Welcome to the Clean Comedy Podcast, featuring James Creviston and Luke LaCoy. Yeah, we're about to get clean up in here, so clean your mouth out with a bar of soap and get ready for the Clean Comedy Podcast.
Welcome to the Clean Comedy Podcast. I am not James Creviston or Luke LaCoy. I am David Studebaker, and I am taking over this show for this episode. Why, do you ask? Well, because one of our hosts, James Creviston, is a very, very talented writer, and he is doing incredible things on a very difficult platform to do incredible things. Fiverr, how many R's are there? I think there's 8 R's. It's a lot of R's. It's 5 with a lot of R's. So I said, hey, I've been interviewed on here multiple times. I think it would be fun for Luke and I to interview James. So we got my big horse in the background. We got my boy's toy here, and we're coming at James. So welcome, James, to the Clean Comedy Podcast.
Thank you. It feels awkward and weird to be on this side of that equations because I'm usually the one throwing questions down. So that's good.
Yeah, no, I love the uncomfortability. It's fantastic. I love it.
I'm usually never uncomfortable on this podcast, but today I'm so uncomfortable.
It's beautiful. Here, will Luke say hello to the people, my co-host?
Hello. How you doing?
So, James, thank you, Luke. I can always count on you, Luke.
My role hasn't changed one bit.
I can always count on Luke. So for context, if you don't know what Fiverr is, I don't know if you've talked about it on the show before, but basically my understanding is it's a platform where people can be hired for gig work kind of any kind. A lot of it is creative, so film editing, video editing, writing, songwriting, etc. But my understanding is you can do a lot of different jobs on there. But essentially, you make a profile and people who need something done go on there and they hire you, and you can have reviews and you can, there's a lot of different ways they can find you, but it's really blowing up. And initially, when James started it, it was a newer thing, and a lot of people on there, I believe it got its name because people would charge like $5 for it. Like that was the thing. It was, you spend a $5 and you get cheap labor. But it has grown, and as people have grown on there, the demand has grown. So you can make more money on there. And James was an early adopter who did great work on there and built a strong following, and now, does very well on there. And people hire him for, I'm not going to say how much. It could be anywhere from 50 cents to $50 million. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. So I genuinely don't know how much he's making on there. But I know he does well, and I know he's busy because he's constantly writing stuff. He's getting so much work on there. He'll hit Luke and I up and be like, hey, do you want this gig? I can't take it, but if you want to do it. So he's doing great, and I thought it'd be interesting to interview him. So my first question for James is, how did you get started on Fiverr? What made you decide to want to do anything for $5?
Well, the first thing that I did was I listened to a podcast by a guy named Pat Flynn, and he had a bunch of people on there talking about how they were doing side hustles. And then there's another podcast called Side Hustle Nation that I started listening to, and that guy had some people on there. But one of them, I forgot which one it was, had a guy that had bought a house off of Fiverr. So he had done Fiverr for a couple of years and ended up buying a house off of his Fiverr stuff. And I was like, whoa, that's kind of cool. Like, what did he do? So I just listened to the podcast a bunch of times. Like, I must have listened to that same podcast like 3 or 4 times and try to figure out. And then I was like, what am I going to do? And at that time, Fiverr was very new. There was weird things like, write something for you for $5. Where there's like tons of people that were like, I'll impersonate somebody for you, or I'll do a silly video or whatever. So I was trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do? What would I do that would be beneficial that I could make $5 off of? And I happen to have a pretty good job working at home, but my hours were erratic. They were like late at night and early in the morning, and then sometimes in the afternoon. So during the day, sometimes when I wasn't doing stuff with the company, I was like, well, I should do something else. And at first I tried a couple YouTube videos and making different things. And it was going slow and okay. I was gonna watch all the AFI's top 100 movies and make a review for them. And then after I heard this podcast, I'm like, I'm gonna try to do something. I'm gonna try to do write for somebody. So I put up there, I'll write like 5 jokes for $5 or something like that. And and for like a month, nothing, not one thing. And then once you get one, then you'll get 2, and it just starts a snowball. And so from that effect, that's what I started doing. And then I branched out into screenwriting or reviewing screenplays, writing jokes, slogans. I have a thing for this podcast where if you want your podcast or your show or your product listened to before the podcast, it's one of those things that I offer too. I wrote a Santa Claus stand-up set that doesn't sell at all on there. Really,
we helped you with that one.
yeah. So we worked on that. So there's those that hasn't sold yet. My wife bought one just because I think she was being nice, but like that one really hasn't sold. So, but there's a little bit of work. But what impressed me so much about it is it's not $5 anymore. It's not just like $5. There are people, not me, but there are people who charge thousands of dollars on their base package for stuff. Even at one point, it was either earlier this year, or the end of last year, Eli Roth was on Fiverr, and you could send him your screenplay, and he would give you notes and feedback on your screenplay for, I want to say it was like $1,000 or something like that. It was like something crazy, and I was like, this is so interesting. And it started to slowly grow. And so from there, having writing samples and doing things pushed me further into Fiverr, and now that now I've worked on a couple of shows, stuff that I have material to show other people if I want to make something in the future.
Yeah, and that's something where, as you've built it, it seems like, yes, there are the, writing Santa Claus jokes and things like that, but, you've written on some legit shows. I mean, there was there's a Facebook Live show, or not Facebook Live, Facebook Watch show where you can plug it, but it was really great. I mean, you co-wrote all of the episodes or a bunch of them, and it was funny, it was interesting. The guy had, superpowers that went awry, and it was, and now there's an animated show. There's a lot of different things where you still do freelance stuff where it's just like, hey, here's my passion project, can you turn it into a script? But there's also things where now you've gotten like really good credited shows from doing it.
Yeah. And the big part of that is if anyone ever wants to get into any kind of writing, no matter whether it's Fiverr, Upwork, some other platform, whatever it is, you have to have samples, because the number one question I get asked all the time is, do you have samples? Can I see what you've written? Can I see what you've done? And so I have now a standard formatted response with all the links to all my stuff, so people can go and look it up anytime. My IMDb, all my stuff, because then I don't have to worry about it.
Well, and that's the thing that, that a benefit you have that I think someone listening at home might want to also take into account, that I think maybe is second nature to you, but there's the writing end, but also, I mean, you have an MBA, and as your slogan is, you turn the funny into money. But you are very, I mean, the creativity is really important to you, and you have all that, but, you are very driven, and you understand business, and you understand that aspect of it. And so that's something I think if someone's listening at home, they're like, oh, okay, well, I'll write a sample, but I'll do a writing sample, I'll do the whole thing. But I think also, learning some things on the business side and kind of making sure that you really focus on that is important too. Because that's something for me, like, I mean, I do some freelance writing things, but most of my income before COVID came from live shows. And that's something where, like, I've had to put hours and hours and hours into managing my Excel spreadsheets and my taxes and all of the different things that go into managing the business and marketing the business and doing all that. And you can get things from it, but it takes that time. But that's something that's also interesting. Oh, sorry, Luke, I didn't mean to hurt the Luke moment. You go, Luke.
So we're not sponsored by Fiverr in any way for doing this. Wanted to, if they want to throw us some money, so be it.
Right?
But
you should send this to Fiverr, actually, and let us know, because really, I mean, they should sponsor this episode. This is a good idea, Luke. Send it to Fiverr. Yeah, we want that. Speaking of credit for things, that's something that's also interesting. most of what you do on there is ghostwriting, right? So most of it is someone has like an outline, and some of these outlines are not, some are good, but some, I mean, I granted, Luke and I are getting the leftovers, so we're not always seeing the cream of the crop. But some of these, it's like, man, because I have a degree in screenwriting, so I understand structure and I understand stuff, and so some of these I'm like, woo, how do you take that and turn that into a script? But I feel like it's interesting because you would, on the one hand, you're not getting credit for certain things, so it hurts on that end of like you put all that into it, and if it becomes a big movie, no one would even know you did it. But on the other hand, do you feel like it gives some freedom of like, well, I'll write whatever it is because it ain't James Creviston on the title?
Yeah, so sometimes that's the way it is, where it's just like, oh well, this is not me, or like I've tried and I've stopped doing this because I realize it doesn't benefit anyone. I've tried where I go, no matter how good it is, this probably isn't a viable product. Like, you probably can't sell this screenplay. Like, nobody wants to see a movie about, talking donkeys that murder their spouses. Like, that's not a thing, I'm saying, or whatever it is. Like, there's weird stuff that happens that I get sometimes. Yeah. And it's like, I try to talk people out of certain projects. And if I really feel like I can't do somebody justice, like I'm not going to be able to bring my A game to whatever project they want, I politely decline them. I just say, listen, this is not for me. I'm not the person to do this. Unfortunately, I don't think I would be the best person to write this for you, the best person to work on this project. So I always keep that in mind. I try to have a large amount of customer service where I tell people up front, hey, this is what I can do. This is what I can't do. These are what I'm good at. This is what I'm not good at, right? If someone brings me a drama about teenage LGBTQ kids, I'm not going to write that because I don't know anything about that world, right? And I'm very upfront about that. Like, hey, I can't write that. This is not it's not my story to tell. Two, I have no idea. I will give you the stereotypical version, and that sucks. That's not going to benefit anybody. So my biggest thing is always being upfront with people about what they send me. People do come with like a kernel of an idea, like, hey, I have an idea for this thing, and this is all I have. And you're like, okay, cool. Let's figure that out. So then that process for me usually is making an outline for them and then making the script. So then that's two separate things. Sometimes they come with an outline, but it might be kind of weird, like, bounce around or not chronologically set or kind of like off. And then I have to go, hey, can we work on this? Can we fix this first? And I may do that pro bono. I may do it to get the bigger gig, or I may just charge them a smaller amount and then put it towards the bigger gig. So that happens every now and then as well. But I really try to, my biggest thing is being upfront and honest about what I can and can't do. If you come to me with a thriller or a drama or a LGBTQ film or something like that, I'm probably not going to be able to do it. It's not my wheelhouse. I'm not good at that. If you bring me an action movie or a comedy or even a horror movie, I can do that. But the other stuff, I'm not going to be able to do. Now, the biggest thing that I hear is because I want to be WGA, is that when that day comes, I have to give this up. So that's the part that's going to suck, because I also know that WGA writers, just because you sell one screenplay and get the WGA, doesn't mean you ever get to work again. That's not a guaranteed thing. So that's a good question.
That is an interesting thing you brought up. So two things don't let me forget the WGA.
Okay.
But just before that, that's something where, again, talking about the business end, you're a very honest guy. You know how to run a business. You know how to do that. And that's something where that's a component that people don't think about. They think, oh yeah, I just want to write. I just want to be creative. But being able to know, okay, this is how much time I have. This is what I can do. What kind of deadline do I offer them? Because you offer very concrete deadlines and you hit those deadlines. And that factors into what you can take and what you can't take. And then the other aspect from a creative end that is interesting is you're getting outlines. And so some of them you're not. And sometimes it's actually easier when you don't get an outline, because there's been projects you've sent me and other things I've read, other things I've been given outside of there where I have an outline. It's almost harder if the outline is a mess, it's harder to fix that and make that right, as opposed to like, just give me some characters and a premise and I'll do that. Because you also don't know with a client, and that's something to talk to the client, like, of this thing you sent me, what do you really, really need in there? What do you really love that you don't want me cutting? Because some things like they kind of like, but they don't need, and some things you don't know. Like if you take out that character, that thing, it may make it stronger, but they may be like, oh, I need that in there. So that's definitely, but the WGA end is really interesting because that's something that actors face with SAG, where Screen Actors Guild, where there is a way to be SAG and still take non-union gigs, and I don't know if it's that way with WGA.
There is. It's called FICOR, and you're not a full member. Yeah, but you're also looked upon badly, and
you're a scab, and So and I have I do acting gigs, but I don't have any SAG ones. So and there really is an advantage because for unions, number one, you have to pay in. So SAG, it's like $9,000, $3,000, something like that. And you have to pay dues. Now you get great health insurance, so there's that end. But you're technically not supposed to take non-union stuff. And it really is a big decision in anyone's career in acting or writing. So for James, that's a huge decision because you really got to weigh, okay, I'm WGA, so I can take bigger gigs. It's more prestigious. There is all that. But man, like I had 2 kids to feed and I'm making this much money doing this. And James also produces things. And so, I mean, he could potentially produce his own movie and it wouldn't even need to be WGA. So all those factors weigh in. And do you, I mean, where are you in that? Are you still feeling like you'd like to be WGA or are you happy right now with what you're doing?
I mean, I would love to be WGA. It'd be great, right? Because then you get to make a movie that's seen by billions of people, potentially. But as I said, I've looked at the numbers of WGA, and just because you are in doesn't mean you're going to work forever.
Well, and sorry to interrupt, but that's the other thing I meant to say that's kind of funny. You were saying like, you'll tell these people like, yeah, this isn't getting made. Like, what are we doing? And let me tell you, I don't want to be mean, but boy, James gets some ringers. But in the end, but a lot of people don't know with scripts, even if you sell a script, there's like maybe a 1% chance, like 1% of the scripts that actually get bought by production companies and studios actually get made. And then of those, only like 1% are even good. So like the shot of anyone even making a movie, unless they're, a billionaire who's just going to, pay for it themselves, is so minuscule that, yeah, James, you might as well. If their money's green and they want to give it to you and you feel you can write it, why not?
I usually try to do this fact. I usually talk them down to this, say, look, because as I've had people approach me like, hey, I want to write a movie to sell to Kevin Hart. And I'm like, okay, first of all, that's not going to happen. All right.
Although he is in everything. So, yeah, I mean,
what's that?
If it's a movie, Kevin Hart's in it 50% of the time. So
yeah. But so I'm like, okay, so first I do that. I go, hey, that's probably not going to happen. But if you love this movie idea, you want to shoot this movie, you want to make this movie to get made, let's do it so that you could potentially shoot it yourself if you want to, so that we can make it, single, maybe 3 locations, minimal actors, all the same stuff you want, but we're not depending on Kevin Hart. You're not depending on a big production company. You can do it yourself. Now, several times that has backfired and people say, well, then I don't want your help because you can't guarantee I'm going to give Kevin Hart. I'm like, good. I don't want that. I don't want to guarantee you that anyways. I can't guarantee myself that. Why would I guarantee you that? That's stupid.
You don't advertise on Best Friends with Kevin Hart?
No. And then I say, okay, if you don't want to do that, then if you want to make something, let's find a way to make you something that's going to get your name out there so that you can do it, so that it benefits you. So I've worked with a couple of people on that stuff, and it's led to other things. So Jared Johnson we had on here, I believe, and I had him on the Comedypreneur show, and he does an animated thing that he self-funds. It's like $6,000 an episode or something crazy like that. It's like a couple grand. And this guy's working at Walmart making his dream come true. He works at Walmart. I write scripts with him. He writes stuff, and then he puts his own money into funding animation, and he makes his stuff. So if a dude who works at Walmart and hustles his butt off to make his dream come true can do it, and I love Jared. I'll tell him that I love the guy. He's amazing. If he can do it, anybody can do it, because that's a dude that your dream just has to be bigger than you. You can't be like, well, unless I have Ron Howard doing it, unless Kevin Hart's going to be like, it's like, no, dude, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen for 90% of people. Sorry.
Yeah, well, and the bigger the budget is, the more that you put into it, put into your script, the less of a shot you have of making it. And that's another thing that I would suggest to anyone who's an aspiring screenwriter is also learn production and understand that. Maybe take some college classes, maybe get a degree, maybe work on productions, do something, because that's something where for me, I also have a background in production. And so whenever I'm writing, I'm cognizant of that, because you're not that you can't write a big budget movie, or not that it can't happen, but literally every camera change you have adds money to it. Every room that you're in adds money to it. Just go out there, shoot a 5-minute movie, secure a location, and do it all top notch, and see how much that costs you and how much time that takes. And then think about that for everything. And then in terms of casts, every actor that you add on there is another piece of money. So that's something where if you're writing spec scripts, so there's one thing of like you're writing on Fiverr and people are hiring you, and you want to know that going in so you can advise them like James does. But if you're for your own passion projects, if you're not going to produce them yourself, or even if you are, but if you're sending spec scripts to studios, you don't want to kill your idea and not have it be good, but definitely, yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Luke, did you have a question for James?
Yes. What advice would you give anyone in comedy who would like to get involved in the Fiverr world? And is it too saturated? Are there too many comedy writers out there? Because I know we did look at some video editing, and there's thousands and thousands of video editors. So.
I don't think that comedy writing is saturated yet, but I also don't think that the quality of comedy writers that could be on Fiverr are there. I think I know a couple on there that are pretty good, and I know that there's a bunch on there that are just like, okay. Like a dude who was at an open mic and was like, saw that somebody made money on Fiverr and then decided he would jump on and try to write jokes, and never wrote jokes. He's only done, a couple open mics or whatever. Here's the thing. This is what's going to distinguish anybody from the standard person on Fiverr is when you go there and you have a portfolio to show. So if you're a stand-up comedian, you better have a video of you doing stand-up. And if I were you, I'd probably have 2 or 3. And they better be all different jokes. They better not be the same 5-minute set 3 times. That's 1. 2, you better know how to write a joke out properly. If you don't know how to write a joke out properly, you're not going to make any money. Because I've written jokes for all kinds of people there. But you better know how to do a setup. You better know how to do a punchline. You better know how to do a tag. You better know how to break it down so they know how to tell the joke, because you're writing it for them, and then they're going to go tell it. If they don't know how to tell it, they don't know the pacing, the beat, the proper style, they're going to bomb, and they're going to blame you, right? So you got to do that. If you want to write something like greeting cards or T-shirt slogans or business slogans or silly about me pages or whatever, that's things that you can do that people are always looking for. That's not usually my cup of tea. I do write jokes and I do write slogans and greeting cards and stuff like that. We do that kind of stuff, but it's not the basis of what I do anymore. When I started, it was writing jokes or punching up people's speeches. I wrote best man speeches. I wrote a business guy. He got an award, and I wrote a skit for him and his business partner that they were going to do when they accepted the award. All kinds of stuff, like so many different things. So it's not oversaturating. Go ahead.
So that was something that popped into my head that is would be a struggle for me, and has been when I've tried to write other things. And I'm curious for you, because your stand-up comedy is clean. And
I don't write dirty jokes.
Yeah, but there are scripts that you are given where they want it to be a dirtier script, and how does that affect you? Because for me, there's certain, I could never write a horror movie, because I like writing thrillers and mysteries, but there's a certain to me, writing there's a higher element to me with writing. It isn't just doing my numbers and my accounting, because there are people who writing jokes and writing even scripts is very mathematical. There's people where they take the structure, they do the mathematics, and they plug everything in their head. For me, I tune my entire, kind of lose myself in it. I go into that world, and it's too traumatizing for me to go into the world of a horror movie, because I literally feel like I live it when I write a script. And that's something where, do you struggle with that with certain things? There's even certain like comedic things where I'm like, if I'm tuning in, I'm like, oh God, like I don't want to see that or hear that. Like I just wrote that, but I feel it so much when I write it. So have you felt that? Have you struggled with that at all?
Not in anything I've accepted. In things that I've turned down, yes, where I was like, I can't, that's not what I do. But horror movies, I grew up watching horror movies. So for me, it's like not that big. I mean, I'm a kid who grew up on Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And like, oh, that's just it doesn't bother me. My wife won't ever watch that stuff.
You're such an interesting dichotomy because you're this like really upstanding, good Mormon Christian man who is like you can always count on him and clean comedian. Yet, like, you do really enjoy the horror movies.
Well, it's because those things aren't real, right? We can watch something that's not real and just enjoy the beauty of somebody scaring the crud out of you.
Someone's head being chopped off with a chainsaw.
But I mean, but they're scaring you, right? Being scared is the exact flip side version of making somebody laugh, right? You're shocking somebody into an emotion that you want. So with horror movies, it's shocking them into screaming or freaking out or whatever, and then with comedy, it's shocking them into laughing, right? You're getting the punchline, which is the shock portion. It doesn't have to be a dirty joke to be a shock, by the way. It's just like you say that punchline and they go, I never thought of that, or whatever it is, and they do that. It's the same thing. And so that'll
be the next time I take over the Clean Comedy podcast. That'll be our discussion, because there are studies that they have done where our brains don't actually know the difference between what we see on the screen in real life. So so there are psychological ways we take that in that they've proven in studies. We'll do that another time. Okay. We don't want to get bogged down in weeds. We're here to turn your funny into money. So, we won't get bogged down in that. But I get the greater point. I mean, there is that release, and there is that, with any sort of thrill or anything like that.
Right. Like, I'm not going to go write somebody an X-rated movie. I'm not going to write somebody a movie where there's a female assault on a woman or something like that. Like, I'm not going to write that kind of stuff. That's not who I am. That's not what I can do. For me, that would be a struggle. That would be where I struggle. But if it's like, Paranormal Activity or Saw, or I don't even know if I could write I probably could. I've never written anything that's like Nightmare on Elm Street or Texas Chainsaw. I haven't written those. I've written kind of like more Paranormal Activity, more like kind of weird stuff like that, like stuff just happening and you don't know why or whatever. But I've never written anything like super dark, and I wouldn't take anything on super dark either.
But is that something, though, just from a writer's perspective, because everyone's different? So for you, because you're able to, I mean, I'm amazed at the amount of scripts you're able to do, work you're able to do. And often, I don't know if this is the case for you, but often when someone is able to have that level of output, they can obtain a certain level of detachment. They're one of the guys who are more mathematical, more kind of, it's more of a puzzle as opposed to an emotional journey. And
some stories are emotional, right? But most of the time I have the outline. I put the outline for each page, each scene. I write them for, 3 to 5 pages or whatever it is, depending on how big the scene is. And that's it. I just like, hey, I've got this many pages I have to do today to get this thing done on time. And I just crank them out. And so I don't have a lot of time because I'm using what I already have written in the outline or what notes I have. And maybe I'll come up with something different, or maybe I'll be writing like, that's not going to flow right when we get to this thing. And then I'll change some stuff. But I am semi-attached and semi-disattached at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that does make sense. I mean, and for me, I'm able to do that more when I'm refining, like a recent thing we did where I helped with a rewrite on something. That for me is easier, because if I'm not fully generating, then I do what I do where I go into that world, but I'm much more with the just kind of putting puzzle pieces together, because that's what I do after I've kind of gone through. But that, that is an important thing to understand if someone's interested in this, is that, if you want to be able to do as well as James has done, either you're going to have to, charge more and do less, or you're going to want to be someone who can really, really hammer it out and not also just go through the roller coaster of like, if I'm experiencing, like, if I'm walking through that many worlds all the time, like, I'm going to be just like, my eyes will be, and so that's just something to know. And it's something where everyone's different. It's same with stand-up comedy. All three of us have different ways that we write our jokes, and there's not necessarily there's no like, there's no wrong way, but there's no wrong way, but there are, know thyself. So experiment and know what you are before you go in, because you don't want to get swamped, because like that's why James is so good on there, is he knows what he can do, he knows his time frames, and it's consistent. And so learning that is, I think, important. Are there? So I have a fun question,
Okay.
and I don't. Maybe you can't divulge this, so I don't know. But what's the weirdest gig you've gotten on Fiverr, and/or the weirdest you've accepted?
I haven't accepted anything. I mean, I've done like slogans for weird things, like drug paraphernalia related slogans for stuff, like that are supposed to be funny. I've done that before, which is not that big of a deal. But I've turned down, like I said, I've turned down stuff that were like, almost seemingly to me softcore style writing. It's not for me. And then I've also turned down like some like really just like weird ideas that I was like, I don't know where you're coming from here. Like, there's no way I could decipher what you want. Like, it's not gonna work. But yeah, that's not really. I mean, like I said, and the other thing is, I turn down anything that's not a voice I don't think I can capture properly. It's not fair to the person paying me, and it's not fair to the people that might get to watch it if I just do a stereotypical version of something, right? Yeah. That's not right. So I've had a couple times where I've worked with people to rewrite things that have different characters from different backgrounds that I'm not aware of, but I don't ever take on anything that I don't know anything about whatsoever, and that I would write the stereotypical version, because I feel like that's doing more harm than good. Yeah,
no, that makes sense. Luke, did you have a question?
I wonder, like, if the affinity for horror comes from Texas. Something about like the Texas water or growing up there. I don't know.
Do you think there's a lot of horror movies from Texas or something, or what?
I don't know. I mean,
well, if we're going to psychoanalyze James, because he is on the podcast, we're going to make him as uncomfortable as possible. My guess, you tell me I'm wrong, is James has overcome a lot in his life. He didn't have every advantage. He grew up in a tough neighborhood, and he had, early on in your adulthood, you were, shall we say, a proficient fighter. You were not afraid to mix it up with the fisticuffs, and so I think that in that there might be some sort of way of kind of that release of, and not now. I mean, now James is a big teddy bear, and he's sweet, and he's got great kids. And
I still love horror movies.
He still loves horror movies, but I'm saying that came out of like a safer way to kind of let out that steam of like, instead of going out and punching the guy in the face, I'll just watch the guy get punched in the face. And also it lets out emotion, because from what I understand, you had emotions that were pent up, and that there were bad things that were said and done to you. And so it's an emotional release. It's like, I feel that, I got that. Okay. Okay, I can move on. Am I wrong in my psychoanalysis?
You're pretty close to most of it. The other big thing, part of it is, when I was a kid, we were left home a lot, me and my little brother. We had access to basic cable, and so we would watch the biggest one was USA Up All Night, and they would show all like the B horror movies, like The Hills Have Eyes 2, and like I saw Chucky, and like all those all those different kinds of weird movies like that. A bunch of movies that no one else would watch nowadays. I watched a ton of those, and it was the only thing on late at night when my mom wasn't home, because a lot of times there wasn't any. It was they're going to be like infomercials, old people shows, news, or horror movies, right? And so I was like, all right, cool. I guess we're going to watch those, and we would just do that. So my brother and I my brother hates horror movies, but I love horror movies. And then when I was a kid, my stepdad, who was super cool, would take us to haunted houses during Halloween time. He would take us to like 3 or 4 or 5 every year. And so it was fun. It was like a fun way. I felt like connected to him through that process. Yeah. And so for me, it became like, I just associated with that same thing. Like, oh, this is a fun time. So it's not scary. It's fun for me. And it would that's what would happen. So I think that's probably a big portion of it. But yeah, a lot of it too is, there's pent up anger and stress and frustration and whatever. And whether it be, and that's probably why I'm also attracted to comedy, because whether it's comedy or horror, you let that out in a way that's constructive and positive.
Well, yeah, and especially the way you describe comedy, because the angle of talking about the shock and release.
Yeah.
Because for me, I get you are right on that and the fundamentals of. But for me, I don't almost ever see comedy as a shock mechanism. For me, I see it much more as like a tickle, which is kind of a shock, but it's different. And it's also like, for me, it's a connection. Like losing live shows for me is like the hardest thing. Cause I got into comedy because and actually it's funny that I'm doing this with you, because if anyone ever would come to one of my shows, if they exist again, one of the things I do is I bring audience members on stage and then I psychoanalyze them like I just did to James. And amazingly, I was pretty right on the James.
No, yeah.
But it is interesting. But yeah, so that makes sense. And that's why, although I'm not a horror person and I couldn't write, I get James enjoying the horror. And I appreciate you allowing me to psychoanalyze and make you uncomfortable on the Clean Comedy Podcast.
It's all right. Luke, did you have a question?
What are the major, or are there any like struggles that you have on Fiverr with any clients, or
I think just them not understanding the process sometimes can be frustrating, or sometimes you work through a whole setup to get somebody to buy from you or to make the deal with you, and then they ghost you or they change their mind or whatever, and that can be frustrating. But for the most part, no, just like I've had a couple people try to like, I've only had it happen twice really, where someone tried to like rip me off, where they were like, oh, I didn't like this thing. And I was like, that's exactly what you asked for. I did 100% of what you wanted. And so I've had to refund their money. But it's, like I said, it's only happened twice. And then there's also, when you're a new Fiverr person, there's a lot of scammers on there who try to get you to like, hey, I'll write for you if you pay me a portion of whatever you make. And I'm like, why would I do that? I'm never going to do that. Like, I don't know you. Like, I'm not going to do that. They also make you lose your account too. The biggest thing is, if you could just think about it this way. This is how I've approached Fiverr my entire time. If the other person on the other side of the screen, on the other side of the text, on the other side of the messaging is someone that you're related to, someone that you know, and you want to do the best by them you possibly can, right? So think about it. You're helping someone you know, your grandma, your uncle, your best friend, your niece, whatever it is, whoever you want to picture. That way, you're always going to give your best, right? And you should always try to care as much about those people as possible, because you're providing them a service. I hate when people are like, well, I just want to give my money and forget those people. It's like, no, dude, what you don't understand is that they're other people too. You wouldn't want someone to do that to you. You want someone to provide the best product possible. How many of us have ever ordered something off of something, Amazon, or ordered a pizza or whatever, and when it got there, when the item got to you, you're like, this is not what I expected at all. This is terrible. This is horrible. So then you make a complaint, and the person on the other side goes, sorry, nothing I can do about it, man. You already paid for it. Have a great one. And you're like, I gave you money for a product that you didn't give me the right product. You didn't give me the right thing. You gave me a pizza that had anchovies when I asked for a pizza with pepperoni. What's wrong with you? You're like, it's not my problem. I didn't do it. So you have to learn to take accountability with it. And that's the thing that I see. And take pride in your work too. I take pride in everything that I do on there. Yes, my name's not on it. You're right, David. My name is not on 99% of the stuff there, but I write it as if my name was going to be on it, because to the client, my name is on it. I am putting my name on it for them. I'm telling them, hey, I'm writing this for you. And so my name is still on there. That's why I have a 5-star review. If you go and look around on there, there ain't that many people that just have 5-star reviews overall. There's not. That doesn't happen.
I mean, that's impressive, just because even the greatest restaurant in the world, you could there's crazy people everywhere. And
well, I got crazy people too. But
no,
yeah.
I know, but I'm saying there's people out there where they'll hire you and literally they'll find something they don't like. So the fact that you have a 5-star across the board, that speaks volumes more than anything. And again, Fiverr. I really think you should sponsor. I'm just going to preemptively say this Clean Comedy Hour Clean Comedy podcast brought to you by Fiverr. Fiverr, the place that should sponsor this podcast.
I wish that was the case.
So how much time do we have left? Do we want to keep going, or
No, I think it's up to you guys.
I'm loving making you feel uncomfortable. I will have to. Yeah, I don't know if you guys can hear there's a baby. He's getting a little restless in the other room. So we'll do one more question each. So Luke, you go first.
Where can people find you on Fiverr?
Just my name, James D. Creviston on Fiverr. So you just type that in under the username, and I'll pop up. You'll see all my stuff. Please buy my Santa Claus stand-up.
Yeah, actually, yes, please, because Luke and I get a cut. So please.
We worked really hard on that. That's the thing is there's a G version for everyone, a PG version, and a PG-13. So no matter what style you want to tell, obviously there's not an R X-rated version. I'm not making I didn't go out to Andrew Dice Clay and ask him to write me some Santa Claus jokes, but or work with him on that. But so. I mean, you can use them in anything, and I think it's like $5 for the basic one, $10 for the second one, and $15 for the third one, or something like that. Or it's like 10, 15, 20.
With deals like this, you can't afford not to buy it. Although you're kind of getting hurt with COVID because there's going to be less holiday parties. But
what I think is
perfect for a virtual holiday party.
That's what I was thinking.
Santa, you talk to your people. You can't.
And here's the thing: the jokes are they're yours to use, right? You can use them. They belong
every year.
Yeah, you can use them every year.
Your employees.
Yeah, you can be a Santa Claus every year. And somebody could make a business out of just doing that, doing stand up as Santa Claus, and selling those videos for virtual conferences like this. Hey, we have Santa Claus. He's going to tell us jokes, and then they can record themselves telling the jokes, and Santa Claus up there.
$5 can turn into a seasonal career for you people. Come on. What is he's practically giving this away.
All right. David, yours.
So I'm going to do the wrap up because I think I remember how to do this. I think I've done the show enough times I can do it. So James, where can people find you?
You can find me at jamesdcreviston.com, comedypreneur.com, or on YouTube or Fiverr under the name James D. Creviston.
Luke, where can people find you?
Luke LaCoy on the social medias.
Nice. Okay. I am David Studebaker. I am probably fired after this episode, but it has been a blast. I've really enjoyed taking over the show. You can find me at www.davidstudebaker.com, spelled like the car, if anyone knows what that is still. At David Studebaker on Instagram, Studebaker Comedy on YouTube, TikTok. TikTok's my new jam. And you know what? We saved it. I was going to actually feed Joe Biden a campaign slogan. If on TikTok, I was going to give him "Make America TikTok Again." So if he pitched that, hey, if I win, I will bring back TikTok. Your booty videos will come back. But Microsoft saved it, so I don't have to do that myself. But TikTok at Studebaker Comedy, or you can search David Studebaker. I think you find me there. And I'm going to stop talking about my handles because I've used up most of this outro just for myself. But, hey, this has been a blast. Thank you guys for listening. Fiverr, you better sponsor it. Fiverr, if you sponsor it, Fiverr, I will memorize how many R's are in your name. I think that's a deal. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Until next time on the Clean Comedy Podcast.
Bye.
Yeah, we're about to get clean up in here. So clean your mouth out with a bar of soap and get ready for the